Up until recently, Israel engagement has been judged according to a certain sliding scale, that we've managed to bring our students from the outside to the inside, or from the inside further inside, hence the sliding scale. Inside would suggest that there's an affection for Israel, a connection to Israel, something which makes me talk about Israelis as we rather than as them. By contrast, to be on the outside would be a little bit like the wicked son at Seder night at Passover, whereby the Jewish student will look at Israelis and talk about them and think about of him or herself as disconnected from the place. Okay, so the suggestion was that success was the further inside you managed to bring your student. What we at Makom are suggesting is that nowadays we're in need of another axis to this understanding of success and understanding of what we're aiming to achieve, that we need also the axis of resolution. High resolution or low resolution. Low resolution, green is green. High resolution, green breaks down in its details. Green breaks down to yellow and blue, and Hamas, and Maccabi Haifa, and environmental issues, and the color of Egged buses. The resolution is much greater. We could say that in the early 20th century, or the mid 20th century, the goal of the educator was to bring the student into the bottom right-hand quadrant. Why? We needed them inside. We needed people to be emotionally committed to Israel. The student didn't need a huge amount of detail. Why? Because the mission was very clear. The mission didn't need details. We needed to establish a state of Israel. That was what we needed to do, and therefore we needed to commit our time, our resources, and our lives to making that happen. The nuances weren't as important as an instinctive, clear, simple in the sense of pure response. Our suggestion would be that now that Jewish identity is so complex and dynamic and ever evolving, and that Israel is so dynamic and complex and ever evolving, that in order for us to be fully, responsibly connected to Israel, we need our students to be up in the top right-hand quadrant. This 21st century goal entails our students being on the inside. They need to be committed and with an affection towards Israel, a connection to Israel which lives inside their own identity, but at the same time they need to know details, they need to understand nuance. Down in the bottom right-hand quadrant is the place for emotions, of hugging, of giving love to Israel, love and support. Up in the top right-hand quadrant, there's room for hugging and wrestling. We're inside, we're committed, but at the same time our commitment means that sometimes we will applaud and sometimes we will not applaud what we see as happening in Israel, and will work to better Israel. Down in the bottom right-hand quadrant, the lower the resolution, the more the emotions come into play. In the top right-hand quadrant, the more cognitive emotions come into play, whereby there's a connection between the emotion I feel and the knowledge that I gain. And certain knowledge will affect my emotions, and certain emotions will affect my knowledge. Down in the bottom right-hand quadrant, there's a clear understanding in the right-hand quadrant that Zionism is about living as a free people in our land. In fact, the whole right-hand side of this matrix suggests that we agree with and identify with the idea of the Jews being a free people in their land. The difference being, in the low-res quadrant, free people in our land is a harmonious idea. Whereas in the top right-hand quadrant, again, free people in our land very much is the way to identify people's understandings of Israel, but there's also an awareness with the details, with the nuance, that this concept of free people in our land isn't always peaceful, that there are also tensions between these three values of freedom, of peoplehood, and of a people being connected to a land. Now, first of all, we would suggest that this is a useful tool for you as an educator or you as a leader to look at this matrix and place yourself. Where would you put yourself on this matrix? And having done that, we would then ask the people that you're working with, your staff or your students or your community, where would you place them? The second way of working with this matrix we would suggest would be then to analyze from where and to where you would like to bring the people that you're working with. If, for example, your student or your congregation, you would place them in the low res inside, that they are in love with Israel, support Israel, but don't necessarily know a great deal about the details of Israel, then we want to bring them upwards. We want to take them up into the top right-hand quadrant, combining their affection with knowledge. If we have a student who is in the top left-hand quadrant, somebody who has a great deal of knowledge, then we want to bring them inside and feel that they're part of the place so that they can begin to better Israel and not necessarily batter Israel or feel antagonistic towards Israel. The questions arise with the people who are down here. And here arises what we call the right-angled vector conversation. A traditional way of looking at education would suggest that what we need to do with this student is first of all bring them inside at a low res and then take them up into a high res connection with Israel. We would suggest that there's a flaw in this, first of all, because it's generally speaking that we don't have a great deal of time to work with our people, and it may well be that you only manage to have time to get them inside a no res, and it will only want to be once they leave your institution that they realize that there are complications in Israel. And these people will then undergo something of a trauma. They'll be brought inside by this right-angled approach, but then they will have left the institution, and the more they know, the more they'll be pulled outside. A, because we as educators will have, in a sense, failed them. We will not have given them either the tools to deal with the complexity they're meeting outside of our institution, nor have we necessarily even given them an inkling that there is complexity outside of our institution. And as a result, we lose our students. We would suggest, obviously, straight lines aren't necessarily the way that the world works these days, but something like this kind of a journey, we would suggest is the way to go. Clearly, the way in which one implements this is a longer term process, and you're welcome to get in touch with Makom for us to talk more about the way in which this kind of thinking can be implemented in your institution.